Hello and welcome to my channel. In this video, we will discuss about some of the possible mechanisms by which extrinsic influences related to our lifestyle can affect our cell and tissue homeostasis through epigenetic pathways, and underscoring the importance of stem cell functioning as a sensitive target of these alterations, and also the great variability and pleiotropic of epigenetic related responses, which makes their study a complex and somewhat arduous. So basically in this video we'll talk about epigenetics and lifestyle, that what is the impact of stress, diet and social habits on the tissue homeostasis. And the basic topics that we will cover in this video, that is a part 2. So they are stress and epigenetics. The next we'll talk about epigenetic consequences of psychological stress. The next we'll talk about day-night and epigenetic changes. And lastly we'll talk about cellular metabolites and energy influencing epigenetic regulations. These are the main topics that we will cover in the part 2. So let's talk about them. First of all we'll talk about stress and epigenetics, that is epigenetic consequences of psychosocial stress. Let's talk about it. So what is stress? So stress is generally understood as a heterogeneous group of environmental, that is, or simply you can say internal stimuli that can disrupt homeostasis and thus elicit a biological response, that is allostasis, in order to restore or acquire a new state. So this is the exact meaning of stress. So in this sense, psychosocial stress encompasses the broad behavioral and physical aggressions and changes that complex animals are subjected to in their habitat, and it is related to pathologies such as anxiety and depression. While there exists an important genetic component as regard the predisposition, or that is to the development of these types of pathologies, so it is also true that lifestyle influences their occurrence and evolution. Transgenerational inheritance of behavioral effects that sometimes appear in the unexposed offsprings of stressed subject, and makes a convincing case for the involvement of epigenetic processes. So for instance, let's take an example of a mice. So in mice, maternal separations during early postnatal development has been shown to induce a depressive behavior changes that is also observed in the future male offsprings of unexposed generations, and which is correlated with changes in methylation of certain genes associated with emotional conduct. Very diverse behavioral stimuli has been linked to the modulation of the epigenomes. For example, a single night of wakefulness in human subject has been demonstrated to cause tissue-specific alterations of the methylation state of genes which are associated with the circadian clock. And exposure to the neighborhood violence accelerate the epigenetic clock in the children. Primary pathways related to the psychosocial stress, the glucocorticoids response stands out as a possible causal link between epigenetic mechanisms and the stress responses. Glucocorticoids are the cholesterol-derived hormones produced through the hypothalamic or the pituitary, or you can say adrenal axis in the response to the stress. These molecules bind to the ubiquitous intracellular glucocorticoid receptors, and which translocates into the nucleus to modulate the transcription of the target genes. So in this way, what happens? Glucocorticoids influence a great variety of cellular and the physiological processes, ranging from behavior, cardiovascular tone, immune responses and metabolism, and to cell proliferation and water and electrolyte homeostasis. And consequently, alterations in the glucocorticoid pathways has been widely studied within a scenario of stress-related disorders such as depression, post-traumatic stress disorder and anxiety. So this was all about the stress and epigenetic consequences of psychosocial stress. Next we'll talk about and night and epigenetic changes. So let's talk about it. It's a very important topic of this video, that is day, night and epigenetic changes. So an important field involving the behavioral modulation of our well-being is that chronobiology. So chronobiology, which encompasses the study of biological rhythm. The circadian rhythms are comprised of mechanisms that started from the molecular level and control physiological homeostasis within the 24-hour environmental variations that occur due to the cycle of night and day on the earth. So recent attention has focused on the possible detrimental health consequences of alterations in the day and night rhythm. Night shift work, for example, is repeatedly being epidemiologically found to be associated with a great variety of diseases such as diabetes and cancer. Have examined, for example, the role that circadian clock genes and melatonin, a pleiotropic hormone, plays in the development of these diseases, and leading to the hypothesis that reduced melatonin levels are produced due to exposure to the light during night work. As mentioned earlier, acute sleep loss in a sleep night can lead to methylation changes in circadian clock gene, and chronobiology studies are increasingly indicating the implications of epigenetic mechanisms in the normal functioning of thermomolecular systems involved, as well as in their deregulations. So first level of epigenetic genes and factors are associated with circadian patterns, possibly due to their regulation by clock components. Second, mutation or polymorphisms, you can say, in epigenetic machinery are linked to sleep-wake cycle variations or disorders. And third, epigenetic mechanisms can mediate circadian clock regulation. Some clock elements can be epigenetic actors themselves. For instance, clock, that is circadian locomotor output cycle CAPOT protein. So it is a central regulator of the circadian pathway. It is a histone acetyl transferase. The circadian clock is also known to be affected during the aging process, with studies pointed towards the involvement of the epigenetic factors like SIRT, which can deacetylate clock components such as BMAL, that is brain and muscle, ARNT-like. So thus providing links between the mechanistic controls of aging lifespan and the circadian clock. It is also worth mentioning the relationship between aforementioned glucocorticoids and the clock, as these hormones are strictly regulated by the circadian mechanisms. They display a diurnal pattern of release, and circadian rhythms interconnect with the stress responses. This was all about day, night and epigenetic changes. Next we'll talk about cellular metabolites and energy influencing epigenetic regulations. So let's talk about it. Many histone modifying enzymes are directly requiring nutritional compounds or their derivatives as cofactors for catalysis. Indeed, sirtuins require NAD as a co-substrate, which is found from niacin, which is vitamin B3, meaning that their availability can influence histone acetylation activity. Histone demethylase, that is LSD, requires FAD, that is flavin adenosine dinucleotide, an active form of riboflavin, or you can say vitamin B3 and vitamin B2 as a co-substrate, and has been shown in vitro to regulate energy expenditures in cellular metabolisms. And cellular nutrient availability can also influence genetic regulations through intracellular signaling pathways in an indirect fashion. So, as such, the mammalian adenosine monophosphate activated protein kinase, that is AMPK, which regulates a fundamental intracellular molecular pathway, responding to, among others, and nutrient deficiency stress is increasingly being studied as a potential functional link between dietary calorie restrictions and its effect at the cellular and the organism level, including on the lifespan and the health span. So NAD plus availability. So NAD plus availability is also controlled through the AMPK pathway, which can increase NAD plus levels in response to the energetic stress. As a co-substrate for cetones, which is a type 3 histone deacetylase, and NAD plus levels can influence their enzymatic activity. So this was all about the cellular metabolites, energy influencing epigenetic regulation. That's all for today. See you guys in our next video. Till then, stay connected with us for more videos like this. Don't forget to subscribe and press the bell icon for more updates. Stay safe and stay healthy. And yes, thanks for watching our video. And see you guys in